A new report is shining light on China's efforts to silence Muslim Uyghurs. Vice News correspondent and producer Isobel Yeung traveled to China's Xinjiang region earlier this year, and she and her team pretended to be travel bloggers visiting the area. The UN believes around 1 million Uyghurs are being held in internment camps there. China calls them re-education facilities meant to fight extremism and a separatist movement. Young's report exposes difficulties that journalists face when covering stories in China, especially ones about Uyghurs.
I spent the journey walking up and down the train and hanging out between the carriages and smoking endless packs of Chinese cigarettes in hopes of striking up conversations. On several of my cigarette missions, I walked past a young Uyghur man. He kept catching my eye. When everyone had gone to sleep and the carriages fell silent, he stopped me. We've disguised his voice for his own protection.
All right, so Isobel Yeung is joining me now from London. Thank you so much, Isobel. You said that during your time in China, people thought you were a Uyghur. Can you tell me what the experience was like, how you were treated, and whether or not you were, ever scared that you might be arrested?
Yeah, I mean, I'm half Chinese, and so I could be often mistaken for a Uyghur, as I was a lot of times. I actually traveled to the region about a decade ago, and back then it was kind of considered quite useful to be considered to look like a local. But now that all Uyghurs are considered a security threat, it's obviously incredibly unhelpful because there is so much racial profiling going on in the region that you are pulled aside, you go through extra security checks, and this is just a tiny, tiny sample of what Uyghurs go through every single day. This is the strictest surveillance state in the world right now. Security cameras absolutely everywhere, facial recognition everywhere, voice recognition, face scanning, iris scanning, body scanning, their phones scanned as well to check for any content that might upset the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, this is absolute Orwellian-style surveillance.
Just out of curiosity, we ran a report a little bit earlier today about visitors having apps downloaded onto their phone in order to essentially sort of malware, in order to sort of scrape their phone of information. Did that happen to you?
No, I was aware that that has happened to several people I've spoken to before going into the country, which is why I took a burner phone going in. I took an iPhone because most of that malware is being downloaded onto Androids, and the government hasn't yet caught on to iPhones as much. But that was definitely something I'd heard a lot about, especially crossing over the border into Xinjiang from certain regions and from certain countries, because it borders 8 different countries. So the spot that we went into, we knew that it wouldn't happen to our phones, which is one of the reasons we entered from where we did.
You've reported from war zones like Yemen and Syria. How is it different covering this story here? I imagine the surveillance would definitely be a factor.
Yeah, I mean, what I witnessed there is just unlike any sense of fear that I've ever witnessed before. I mean, when you go into a conflict zone, there's a very real and violent sense of fear. But when it comes to going into this kind of dystopian reality, people are really, really afraid to do the wrong thing or to say the wrong thing or to even think the wrong thing. And therefore, they become scared to even look at foreigners. And I've never really witnessed that sense of palpable fear before.
And you spoke to Uyghur parents living in exile in Turkey. They say that China is separating them from family, throwing children into some of these camps. I want to play a little bit of your conversation.
What do you think happened to your kids?
Kızımның videosunu çıkan kadar men iken bir kızımni hamda Xotendeki bir terbiyeleş, yani balla terbiyeleş lagerdan tatılgan videonu kelgenden keyin men ballarımni başka şäherlerge ýötküp yani
This is her here.
şu. Men birinci katım görüplam tunu aldım.
So you think this might have been taken inside an orphanage?
The video looks like the children are at least well taken care of. They look happy in the video. But what exactly is happening with Uyghur children?
Yeah, I mean, so Kelvinor, the lady featured in that video, though, unfortunately isn't the only Uyghur person to tell us that her children have been missing and suspected to be inside state-run institutions. And so our reporting both outside and inside the country kind of led us to investigate some of this. And what we found is that the number of alleged kindergartens, which often live-in facilities, have exploded in certain parts of the region over the last couple of years, which kind of corresponds with the time that a lot of Uyghur adults have been rounded up and placed in these re-education camps. So it does seem like a number of Uyghur children whose parents are either detained or living abroad have been put into these state-run institutions and kind of brought up as if they were orphans. And it seems that within those places, they are indoctrinated with Communist Party propaganda and taught all-out loyalty to the Chinese Communist Party.
So, part of why we know so much about the plight of the Uyghurs is because of technology, is because of social media. But I know in China, they use that technology and that social media as well. You talk to a woman who's living in exile in Turkey. I'm sure she must have been concerned that, Chinese authorities may at one point see your documentary and there may be repercussions for family members that she has still living in China. How concerned were you for these people? As I understand it, the Chinese government is even monitoring the social media pages of exiles to see if they're speaking out, to see if they're trying to lobby the governments of their new homes to put pressure on China, and then they are retaliating.
Yeah, I mean, that is a real thing. A lot of the Uyghur diaspora that we'd spoken to had said that the Chinese Communist Party had retaliated against them for speaking to press. And one of the most desperate things, which kind of just shows how horrendous the situation is at the moment, is that Uyghurs still wanted to talk to us, especially the Uyghur diaspora was so desperate to find out what happened to their kids, to get any word from their kids or from their family members at all. These are people that they haven't been able to even hear a single word from for the last few years of their lives. And so they were kind of willing to take that risk, and knowing that retaliation may well be the consequence to that.
Isobel, what has been the response from the international community? If you live in sort of any big city here in the U.S., chances are you've seen one of these sort of Uyghur protests or demonstration. They're usually sort of sitting very peacefully, but still trying to get their sort of message out. Is the international community responding?
I mean, it's responding to a point. I mean, the US has spoken strongly about these camps not being re-educational vocational training centers, but in fact being concentration camps. And they have spoken about the possibility of sanctions being placed on China's leaders, but so far that has not been actioned. And I mean, I would say that in general, the international community at large has been rather silent, and disappointingly so, on this issue. And that kind of speaks to the volumes at which China's economic and political prowess is at play here.
Well, part of what you're doing is helping more people to sort of learn about the truth about what's happening inside China to the Uighurs. Isobel, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Emery.